10 Haunting Truckers Stories Revealed, Sinister Secrets of the Open Road You Won't Believe. Every night, at midnight, the phone rings. Jake, home alone in their quiet Midwestern house, feels it shiver down his spine. He grips the receiver tightly, his breath hitching as a gravelly voice spills through the line, slicing through the darkness like a jagged knife. "You had spaghetti for dinner, didn't you, kid? I heard your neighbor's dog barking too. It won't stop, will it?" Panic clenches his heart. Who is this guy? Why does he know their lives so intimately? At first, Jake thinks it's a cruel prank by adults savoring their boredom in this sleepy town. He rolls his eyes, waves it off. But the stories, those haunting tales of truck stop legends, of families that vanished into thin air, bring forth a growing unease. Every tale's underbelly is something twisted and real, something lurking just beyond his own doorstep. "Just listen," the trucker's voice crooned. "You don't want to find out what happens to those who ignore the warnings." Meanwhile, Karen, finishing another exhausting shift at the diner, feels a pit of dread settling in her stomach. When she got home from work yesterday, they'd been surprised by a power outage. Their home had felt like a crypt, cold and foreboding. The door slightly ajar, the lock broken like it had been forced open. It took all her willpower not to imagine the worst. She thought of Jake, alone in there, listening to a voice that could tear through their lives like a speeding truck. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. Karen thinks of the neighbor, the seemingly kind man who always helped her out when she needed it. But his generosity feels different now. The shadows of suspicion wrap around her. When she finally talks to Jake, revealing that she also senses something wrong, she sees the fear in his eyes manifesting. "Mom, this guy, he knows too much," Jake stammers, the words tumbling out, as his racing heart echoes in the dimly lit room. Strange vehicles parked outside, their headlights cutting diagonals across the yard. Missing pets, a neighbor's cat, a family dog. The truckers' stories seep into their reality with disturbing precision. Jake clutches his phone, showing her a grainy image of just such a truck, almost identical to the one he saw. The air turns thick with a hot urgency. They can't ignore it, they must confront what's looming over them. As if on cue, the lights flicker and fade again. The house drapes itself in oppressive darkness. Heart racing wildly, Jake whispers, "Did you hear that?" Tremors of fear quaked in his voice. The familiarity of the gravelly voice echoes through the dark, his tone smooth, chilling, as if he were hiding beneath the floorboards. "I've been watching you both. You aren't safe here." The nightmare had only just begun. The air felt heavy, stifling, as silence enveloped them like a suffocating blanket. Jake's pulse thundered in his ears, drowning out the world. "What do we do, Mom?" he whispered, eyes darting around the room as if the shadow itself had animated into something menacing. The phone felt like a burning coal in his hand, capable of summoning unspeakable horrors. Karen steadied herself. This wasn't the first time she'd faced danger. But something about the way the voice dripped with feigned familiarity sent chills down her spine. "We need to call the police. Right now," she suggested, rising from her chair, but her voice trembled. She took a deep breath, hoping it would ground her, but the shadows seemed to stretch and reach for her, a phantasmagoric reminder of their vulnerabilities. Before she could make the call, the lights flickered again, briefly illuminating the hallway that led to the back of the house. A hollow thump echoed from that direction, plunging both of them into icy dread. They exchanged terrified looks. "Did you hear that?" screamed Jake, barely containing his hysteria. "I did," Karen replied, panic bubbling under her skin. The darkness felt alive. "Stay close to me." They moved as one, hearts racing like high-speed trucks on an empty highway. With every creaking floorboard, Jake swallowed hard, feeling the warmth of his mother's hand gripped tightly around his. The oppressive dark whispered secrets, each crack and pop sounding like a warning. "Mom, what if?" Jake started but was cut short by another thud, louder this time. It came from the back door, now ominously ajar, a sinister invitation into the abyss outside. The yard lay shrouded in fog, the moonlight trembling like a frail candle in the gusty night air. Unnerved, Karen took a step toward the door, peering through the opening with dread shadowing her thoughts. "We can't go out there," she breathed, her voice unsteady as she fumbled for her keys instead. The thought of being exposed, vulnerable, haunted her. Then, like a ghostly apparition, the phone rang again. The noise shattered the tense silence, and they both jumped. Jake shot a panicked glance at the receiver lying on the table. He hesitated, fighting the urge to answer, but the gravelly voice invaded his mind like an unwelcome echo. "You know where to find me," it rasped anew, reminding him of every story he'd ever heard, every legend tied to the asphalt veins of the country where dangers lurked in the shadows of night. Without thinking, he lunged for the phone. "Who are you? What do you want from us?" His voice trembled, vibrated with raw fear. There was a chuckle, low and guttural. "You'll find out soon enough. But don't worry, I'll be the one to show you the way." A sick emptiness coiled in Jake's stomach. His mom's eyes were wide, brimming with realization of the reality they were in. This wasn't a game, it was real and sinister. "We need to go," Karen cried, dragging Jake toward the front door, urgency infecting her tone. With another thumping alarm from the back, the air grew charged with a violent energy. They bolted out the front, the night air slapping them like a bossy specter, demanding their attention. The shadows twisted and danced, darkness beckoning from all directions. But as they dashed toward the street, a hideous realization hit them. Strange vehicles still lined their quiet neighborhood, engines humming softly like predatory beasts lying in ambush, with nowhere to hide and an unseen predator on their trail. Jake grabbed his mother's arm. "What do we do now?" he pleaded, fear bubbling over. In that singular moment, a chilling voice whispered from behind them. "The night's just beginning, kids, you'll see." They stumbled onto the street, the oppressive darkness lingering around them like a thick fog, suffocating yet oddly electrifying. Karen glanced back at the house, shadows flickering behind the windows like wild animals poised to pounce. Panic surged through her veins, a primal instinct urging her to run, to flee from the shadows of their former safety. "Keep moving," she hissed, propelling Jake forward. The eerie glow of the streetlights cast ghostly figures that danced and morphed on the asphalt, distorting their reality. Each step felt heavier, as if the night conspired to drag them down into its depths. They dashed past the parked cars, their metal frames glimmering with malice, resembling ravenous creatures ready to consume them. Karen's heart hammered in her chest, a rhythmic drumbeat reminding her of their vulnerability. "Where do we go?" Jake gasped, his breath fogging in the cold air. "Anywhere but here," she snapped, desperation fueling her urgency. But where could they seek refuge? The houses loomed like grim sentinels, their darkened windows giving no hint of safety. Before they could contemplate their next move, the sound of an engine revved in the distance, a low rumble that grew louder, echoing ominously down the street. Karen's breath caught as visibility dimmed further, the distant headlights cutting through the fog like the eyes of a stalking predator. "Mom!" Jake's voice trembled, fear grasping at his throat. "Shoo!" she whispered, pulling him close. They ducked behind a car parked at a crooked angle, peering out through the space between the tires. The headlights swept over the asphalt, illuminating figures rising out of the darkness. A convoy of trucks, monstrous in size and number, crept forward with an air of dread. A few drivers loomed in the mist, their silhouettes casting long shadows that made their movements sinister. Karen's stomach twisted as she caught snippets of their voices, raspy and low, carrying on the cold breeze. "They're here," one said, his tone dipping into a conspiratorial whisper. The whispers floated along the night air, swirling around them, each word laced with menace. Jake's grip tightened on his mother's hand. "They're looking for us," he murmured, shivering under the weight of his fear. Karen's mind raced. We need to find something to defend ourselves. There has to be something in one of these garages we can use, she said, peering around the car. Just as she steadied herself to move, a glint caught her eye across the street. Someone was standing there, dressed in dark clothing, face obscured by the shadows. The figure was absolutely still, a spectator in the chaos. An unsettling chill raced down Karen's spine. Jake, stay here, she urged, inching closer to the edge of the car, but Jake's soft voice interrupted. Mom, I can't leave you. In that instant, the figure turned, a face she could barely see twisted into a crooked grin, and then it raised its hand pointing directly at them. Her heart plummeted, understanding rushing through her like ice water. Go! She shouted, throwing caution to the wind. They burst from their cover, bolting down the street, legs pumping with the adrenaline that screamed for survival. Every breath felt ragged, every shadow was a threat firing signals of impending doom. They sprinted toward a cluster of trees at the end of the block, the closest semblance of safety. But as they reached the line of towering trunks, their escape route disappeared. A truck's engine roared to life, drowning their screams in mechanical fury. The sound was deafening. Fog curled around them, expanding like a living entity, and the taunting laughs echoed from behind a horrific melody of madness and hunger. Mom! Jake cried, panic-stricken. It was too late already. The trucks continued to advance, encircling them with a sinister precision. In that moment, Karen felt something shift within her, a dawning horror, realizing that they were the prey, and the hunters were drawing closer. Stay behind me! She yelled, adrenaline propelling them into the dark embrace of the trees, but shadows entwined around them, pulling tighter as something familiar and chilling echoed in the distance. The voices began chanting in a sibilant murmur, rhythmic and unnerving as if rehearsed. Join us, what awaited them in the woods. The woods seemed to beckon with a sinister promise, yet peril loomed like an unexpected thunderclap. Mom, what do we do? Jake's voice broke through her swirling thoughts, igniting fresh terror. As the night deepened and shadows stretched further, her resolve waned. Their breaths mingled with the fetid air, heavy with unseen dread. Whatever it is, we face it together, she whispered, though uncertainty gnawed at her heart. Then a scream echoed through the stillness, a haunting, bone-chilling cry that sent shockwaves through both of them. Who else was out here? A question they had yet to explore, and in that chilling wake, they felt the darkness preparing to consume them whole. The next chilling echo that rang out resonated deep within their chests, like a distant clock tolling the end to foreboding hope. Mom, Jake whispered, eyes wide with dawning realization. What if the night had only begun? The shadows inside the forest twisted and danced, swirling ominously, and a prickling sensation crawled up Karen's spine. She could sense the darkness around them closing in, the air growing heavier, each breath a struggle. We need to move, she urged, urgency pulsing through her words. But where could they run? The sound of rustling leaves, the snap of a twig, she felt as if they were surrounded by unseen eyes, a stalking presence that thrived on fear. Mom, I don't want to be here. Jake's voice quivered, a high, desperate note that echoed through the trees. Just keep close, she whispered back, wishing for courage she didn't feel. They stumbled deeper into the woods, branches clawing at them as though nature itself sought to hold them captive. The chanting grew louder, swirling, insidious, their words jumbled yet unmistakably welcoming. Join us, they emerged into a small clearing, moonlight spilling in like a spotlight on a stage, revealing a tall mound. It was made of dirt and twisted roots, covered in dark moss and framed by gnarled trees, as if something was buried beneath. An unnatural chill swept through, and she felt a weight in her chest. The very ground seemed to pulse with life, or something more sinister. What is that? Jake asked, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and curiosity, tugging at her shirt. Karen felt the urge to flee but couldn't tear her gaze away from the mound. I don't know, she muttered nervously, drawn in by a force she couldn't comprehend. The chanting had shifted, now rhythmic like a heartbeat, pulling her closer to the mound's core. Mom, look! Jake pointed toward the trees on the other side of the clearing. Emerging from the shadows were figures, shrouded in darkness, their features hidden but their intentions clear, moving with a jerky, grotesque precision. Fear surged through Karen, they were trapped. Now! She yelled, her voice breaking the spell. She spun on her heel, yanking Jake's arm, forcing him to run back into the trees. Branches whipped at them as the menacing figures followed, their footsteps quickening, the chilling chants intensifying. Adrenaline coursed through her veins, quickening her heart, urging her to escape the nightmare drawing closer with every stride. Panting heavily, they pushed deeper into the cover of the trees, breathing labored and choppy. But the sounds of pursuit echoed, a chorus of eerie laughs mixed with chanting, echoing in the dark night. The world around them was a blur of grays and blacks, shadows creeping in like fog seeking to smother their resolve. Suddenly, they stumbled into another clearing, this one overgrown and eerily silent. The air felt electric, like the calm before a storm. In the center, a large object lay shrouded by heavy foliage, its form obscured. Shadows flickered along its surface, like fingers playing just out of sight. "What is that?" Jake whispered, clutching his mother's arm tightly. "Let us not find out," Karen said, her voice barely above a whisper, fear twisting her gut. But curiosity crept in, pulling at her, demanding that she look closer. "We need to find a way out of here," she added, desperate. With a quick glance around, she pulled Jake toward the dense trees on the far end of the clearing, heart pounding in her chest. As they turned away from the hidden object, the chanting paused for a heartbeat, then erupted through the clearing, a terrible resonance that rattled her bones. "Join us!" The ground shook beneath her feet, and dread settled like a stone in her stomach. Something had awakened. She dug her heels into the earth, knowing they had to move faster now, but the shadows caught up, closing in like a noose around their necks. As they bolted back towards the safety of the trees, a piercing shriek shattered the air. "Mom! Look out!" Jake screamed, pointing. And there it was, the figure emerging from the shadows, face ghastly and twisted, skin drawn tight over a skeletal frame, eyes void of mercy, everything Karen feared personified. Just as it lunged forward, she turned, adrenaline pushing her forward. What had they stumbled into? With terror pooling in her gut, the realization hit her, the woods were alive, and whatever was buried beneath the ground wasn't done with them yet. And far behind, she could still hear the echoes mingling with the wind, the invitation to join them. Could they escape whatever waited just out of sight? The rattling whispers returning stronger than before, ready to entice them into the dark. "Mom!" Jake yelled again, but this time something brushed against her leg, cold and snaking. And, for the first time, Karen understood, they weren't just being hunted. They were being called to join the unforgiving darkness. Would they survive long enough to break free, or would they become part of that chilling echo, forever lost among the trees? Karen's heart pounded in her chest, drowning out everything else as she pulled Jake deeper into the woods, their frantic footsteps the only sounds breaking the heavy silence. The figure had vanished into the darkness behind them, but she could still feel those hate-filled eyes boring into her back. "Mom, what was that?" Jake's voice shook, fear wrapped tightly around his words. She could feel her own fear mirrored in his. "I don't know," she said through gritted teeth, forcing herself to steady her breathing. "Just keep running." The shadows seemed to stretch and shift around them, whispering secrets in a language that sliced through the silence. "Join us, join us." It was haunting, seductive. And were they laughing? Karen felt the prickling at the back of her neck again, as if invisible hands sought to reach out and pull them into the darkness. "Mom! Look!" Jake stumbled again, his eyes wide with terror. Karen turned to see what he was pointing at. Looming before them was a narrow path, twisted and overgrown but unmistakably leading farther into the forest's disruptive embrace. Maybe it'll lead us out," she said, though doubt dripped with every word. But there was no choice. With no other options, they plunged into the cramped corridor between the trees. As they moved further, the shadows tightened their grip, the oppressive dark pressing around them, almost alive. The chanting spiraled and twirled, echoing within both their minds. It felt as if the woods themselves were beckoning them closer to whatever concealed horror lay at their core. They squeezed through thick brush, and Karen's hands scraped against jagged bark, biting back cries of pain. Jake pulled at her arm. "I can't breathe," he gasped, panic creeping into his voice. "Just a little farther, buddy," she whispered, desperate to convince herself as much as him. "We're almost there." But then a low growl resonated from somewhere up ahead, reverberating through the trees like thunder. It was a dark warning that sent shivers rippling down her spine. Karen froze. Had they run into something worse, something that actually wanted to hurt them? "Mom, we need to go back." Jake's plea was punctuated by rising hysteria. "Not an option," she insisted. The growl twisted in her ears, pulling her attention, and for a moment, all she could do was listen, and hope. The path twisted and turned, shaping into a maze of dark uncertainty. A fissure of moonlight flickered above, illuminating a set of terrible, glinting eyes hiding within the thick ferns. Her stomach dropped as recognition knotted her insides. The thing from before the figure was there with them again, watching, waiting. "Run!" she shouted, and they took off again, her heart racing faster than their feet could carry them. Branches whipped at her skin, tearing through her clothes as she pushed Jake ahead. But the ground seemed to shift beneath them, as if the forest was aware of their every step. The chanting resumed, this time almost growling a song of hunger mixed with a sinister delight. With adrenaline surging, they burst into another clearing, panting and wide-eyed. It was smaller than the last, dominated by a massive tree with gnarled roots spiraling out like hands reaching for them. The ground here felt wrong. A faint humming vibrated beneath it, pulsating like a heartbeat, alive with dread. "Mom, we can't stay here," Jake begged, clutching at her. As she spun around to find a way back, the figure appeared once more, emerging effortlessly from the shadows, skeletal hands outstretched as if welcoming them. Its smile, disjointed and soaked in malice, sent chills down Karen's spine. "No!" she cried, instinctively throwing herself in front of Jake. But the figure simply laughed, a sound that sent waves of despair crashing through her heart, each jagged laugh creeping closer like a swift tide. Desperation surged through her as she turned to the monstrous tree behind them. Perhaps it could offer shelter or a means to escape, but dread held her in place. The whispers invalidated action the ground beneath her felt as if it was woven from the screams of those who had come before. "Mom!" Jake's fingers were digging into her arm, violent and shaking. She could barely breathe, the air thickened, each inhale a battle against terror that threatened to swallow her whole. "Let us go." With a burst of fury, she yanked Jake closer, but as they made their way to the tree, roots erupted from the ground, coiling around her ankles like serpents. Panic flooded her thoughts, and she struggled against the living Eve. "No! No!" Jake cried, and suddenly both fear and anger collided in a primal scream. In that moment, the world seemed to tilt, the branches above parting as if expecting them to join the ranks of the others lost to the darkness. And just as Karen felt the roots conquer her legs, a blinding light flickered through the trees. "Jump, Jake!" she shouted, tugging with all her might. But where would the light lead? To freedom or deeper into despair? With dread tightening around her heart, she felt the ground pulling, the forest's malicious whispers promising the end. Would they escape the trap of the forest, or succumb to the cursed shadows waiting for their next prey? As the blinding light pulsed and flickered, Karen felt the grip of the roots loosen just enough for her to drag Jake toward it. Her heart raced. They had to move. Still, another split second passed, and the shadows seemed to shift angrily, as if they'd anticipated their escape attempt. "Mom, please!" Jake whimpered, his voice trembling. "Just hold on to me," she shouted, wrapping her arm around him tightly. The glow was both inviting and alarming, flickering like a beacon in the murky darkness. They leapt toward it together. The moment they crossed the threshold of light, a sharp wind whipped around them, lifting Jake off the ground slightly before chaining them both in place. The world shifted again. Gone was the oppressive forest. Instead, they landed with a heavy thud on hard concrete, surrounded by a dim light that flickered from old, rusty street lamps. Karen blinked, disoriented. "Where are we?" Jake asked, peering around nervously. The silence of the unlike surroundings echoed in their ears. On one side of the road, a dilapidated diner stood ominously, its neon sign flickering weakly. The other side was lined with dark woods, a menacing wall that felt somehow familiar. The hairs on Karen's neck stood on end, she didn't want to look behind her. "Stay close," she warned, leading Jake toward the diner. Each step felt heavy, her instincts screaming that something wasn't right. As they approached, the door swung open with a slow creak, revealing a dim interior filled with shadows shifting back and forth. "Maybe someone inside can help us," she said, though doubt gnawed at her. With every step inside, uneasy anticipation pooled in the pit of her stomach. The smell of stale coffee and grease hung in the air, thick and sinister. The only other occupants were two truckers hunched over a table in the corner, their murmurs low and conspiratorial. Their heads snapped up as Karen and Jake entered, eyes assessing, and something in their gaze made Karen's heart race faster. The way they looked at her felt like predatory interest. "What brings you kids out here?" one of them asked, his voice oily and chilling. "You got lost in the woods? This place ain't safe at night." She hesitated to reveal too much. We were just passing through." The trucker snorted, his companion chuckling softly. "Passing through, huh? You ain't seen nothing yet. You sure you didn't catch a glimpse of her?" "What do you mean?" Karen's throat went dry. The second trucker leaned forward, eyes glinting with excitement. "Stories say there's a ghost that haunts these woods. Lures in lost souls. She'll take you straight to her grave if you're lucky." He gave a cold laugh, unfurling memories Karen thought she'd left behind in her frantic escape. "Let me guess," interrupted the first man, leaning back with a smirk. "You did see her, didn't you? You know how it goes, one easy choice and you could be joining the others." A chill crept through Karen. "What others?" Jake tugged on her sleeve, his fear clear. "Mom, let us go." "Now you got him worried," the trucker said with mock concern. "But it's nothing for you to fear unless she marks you." Karen stiffened. "Who? What do you mean?" And just like that, the air inside the diner grew thick, almost tangible. Outside, a wind picked up, rattling the window panes. The truckers exchanged glances, then grinned. "You're not just passing through after all. She knows you've come back." With the weight of their ominous words settling in her chest, Karen turned toward the door. But before she could take a step, a tremor pulsed through the diner, rattling the very ground beneath her. Lights flickered, and outside, a shadow moved in the tree-line, something dark, something alive. "What is happening?" Jake gasped, eyes wide. "Stay here," Karen commanded, though she had no idea what the right thing to do was. They had crossed a threshold, and this time, the woods were calling them back. But how could she protect Jake when her heart thundered with fear? As the shadows darkened the diner's entrance, the ghostly figures materialized once more, beckoning her with open arms, just as they had in the woods. "Come play," they whispered, their voices echoing like a twisted promise. The truckers grinned, eyes glimmering with sadistic pleasure, just as the lights blinked out completely, plunging them into a void. Karen's heart pounded. What had she brought them into? "Mom," Jake's voice cracked, slicing through the suffocating blackness, and just like that, she understood. There was no safety or escape. They were trapped. The sound of frantic footsteps drew nearer, and Karen braced for the inevitable. Would this night claim them, or could they unravel the truth that haunted the darkness? The oppressive darkness pressed against Karen like a living weight. Pulse racing, she grappled with her thoughts, adrenaline fueling her fight-or-flight instincts. The heavy silence that followed the diner's lights going out wrapped around them, every breath echoing like a gunshot in the void. Her grip tightened around Jake as the shadows around them thickened and drew closer. In the distance, the sound of approaching footsteps grew louder. A metallic clank, followed by an eerie shuffle, sent icy shivers down her spine. "Mom, I'm scared," Jake's voice quaked, the tremor in it cutting through her like ice. "I know, honey. Just stay behind me," she whispered, trying to sound braver than she felt. They had jumped from one nightmare into another. Where were the truckers? Had they vanished, or were they lurking, watching them? Then, without warning, the lights flickered back to life, bathing the diner in a sickly yellow glow. The tableau before them had shifted. The truckers were gone, but something else had taken their place. A woman stood behind the counter, her face obscured by the shadows. She seemed to flow in and out of reality, her features merging and blurring like a mirage. "Welcome, lost ones," the woman called sweetly, her voice dripping with a sickly sweet drawl that turned Karen's stomach. "You've come seeking companionship, haven't you? Looking for someone to ease your burden." The door slammed suddenly, rattling in its frame, and Karen flinched. She felt a horrible pull, a desperate need to approach the woman. "No," she shouted, shaking her head vigorously. "Get away from her, Jake." "The ghost," Jake murmured, his eyes watering. "Mom, she looks like the ghost, she's not real." Karen yelled, but the allure in the woman's voice had begun to worm its way into her brain, urging her forward. "Only the lost come to this diner," the woman crooned, her form flickering like a candle in the wind, lips curling into a mocking smile. "But it's all right. You can stay forever." With a primal instinct, Karen grabbed Jake and began to back away, her eyes darting toward the windows. Outside, she could see shadowy forms moving just beyond the glass, their shapes twisting in and out of focus. Thousands of eyes fixed on her, hungry and eager. "We need to get out of here." But as she turned toward the exit, the shadows thickened. The door had transformed into a wall of blackness, shrouded in shimmering darkness. The air crackled, a warning. A chill swept through the diner, sending a fresh wave of dread washing over her. "Do you surrender?" The woman's voice was now a sinister hiss, echoing around them, wrapping around Karen like chains, pulling her closer. "You have no choice. You're already part of the haunting." "No." She strained against the invisible ties, but they pulled harder. Jake screamed, his small body jerking in fright. She felt him slipping again, and panic surged through her. "Hold on." Karen released a desperate cry, wrestling against the overwhelming pressure closing in. She had to protect him. Just then, through the haze of twilight shadows, flickers of movement caught her attention. The truckers. But they weren't simply disappearing, they were integrating with the darkness, their forms slipping into the shadows. With sudden clarity, Karen realized they never truly left the woods. They were still trapped within that same ominous realm, just in a different shape. "Stay with me," she cried, fear flooding her veins. The ghostly figures outside chanted in unison now, their whispers rising into a cacophony echoing her growing horror. Join us," as panic threatened to overwhelm her, Karen's mind raced. They needed a way to escape this nightmare, but how? Suddenly, a flicker of hope ignited within her. If the stories were true, there might still be a way to fight back, not by surrendering, but by confronting what haunted them. "Jake, we need to face them." She shouted over the rising chaos, but could they? With the shadows creeping, impossibly close, Karen knew time was short. "We're not lost," she screamed, adrenaline sharp and pulsing. "We're not your prey." The specters shrieked in response, a terrible sound that tore through the diner as the figures outside erupted into chaos. A flood of darkness surged toward them, stretching to consume every flicker of light, and then the ground began to tremble once more. "Mom!" Jake screamed as the flickering lights overhead dimmed again. Would they be engulfed in shadows, or could they find the truth buried deep within the terror that bound them? She gritted her teeth, resolve hardening. It was time to confront their fate, what lay beyond that door. Would it lead them to salvation or seal their doom? The ground shook beneath them, a low rumble that rose to a fever pitch. Karen's heart hammered like a frantic drum in her chest, drowning out every other sound. She could feel the shadows pressing in, hungry and relentless. She grabbed Jake's hand, squeezing it tightly, feeling his small fingers trembling in fear, and fought to steady her breath. "Mom, I don't want to stay, I want to go home." His voice was a fragile whisper, nearly drowned by the howling darkness. "We'll get out of here, I promise." Karen shot back, though uncertainty clawed at her. Their only escape route now oozed darkness, a void so thick it seemed alive, ready to swallow them whole. Stay with me," she muttered, more to herself than to Jake. Her mind raced, trying to gather the pieces. She racked her brain for a story, a detail in folklore that might lead them to safety. Those tales of other wanderers, who faced the same darkness and were lost forever. Were they trapped in this cursed diner, as the ghostly woman had implied? Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen, sending reverberations through the diner. Was it merely the storm outside, or was something else stirring within? Because the shadows shifted, coiling and twisting, as if animated by a heartbeat. "Jake! Hide behind the counter!" Karen yelled, pushing her son towards the back. She couldn't explain the urgency, but every instinct screamed that danger was near. As Jake scuttled away, Karen faced the lingering presence of the ghostly woman, still standing behind the counter, her smile growing wider, more predatory. "You're not lost, Karen," the woman purred, each word dripping with malice. "You belong to us now. Just give and embrace the darkness." A surge of rage exploded inside Karen. They may be trapped, but she wouldn't let them take Jake. Memories of moments spent reading to him, laughing, and sharing ice cream flooded her mind. She wasn't going to lose him. "Leave us alone!" She screamed, voice cracking, but echoing defiantly within the haze of shadows. With that, Karen lunged forward. The specters shrieked, their wails cutting through her steadiness. The ground quaked violently beneath her feet, and the lights flickered ominously before plunging the diner into an even deeper darkness. Panic bubbled into horror as she momentarily lost track of Jake. Jake! Scattered fragments of visions played out in her mind, the diners from ages past, other lost souls drawn into this together. Where was he? She darted toward the kitchen in desperation, dodging shadowy figures that flared and flickered. Suddenly, she spotted him. He was huddled behind a stack of dirty dishes, eyes wide and shimmering with tears. "Mom!" he cried, reaching out. A massive shape loomed behind him, an immense, dark figure that shifted and morphed, coalescing into a trucker clad in a greasy flannel. Its face was lost in the abyss, but she could see its eyes, those hungry eyes, filled not just with malice but something else. Need. "Let him go!" she bellowed, feeling the tendrils of darkness clawing at her. They wrapped around her ankles like icy fingers, pulling her toward the void. But Jake's voice pierced through. "Mom, please!" The air felt electric, as if the weight of every lost soul pressed in, begging for her surrender. Yet, in that moment of despair, a flicker of determination ignited. She wouldn't yield. Not today. Together. She shouted, finding her strength. "We'll face them together." Whispers swept through the diner like a windstorm, growing louder, drowning her out. The shadows writhed, and she could feel them closing in, leaning toward her, eager for her capitulation. But as the cold seeped into her bones, a flicker of light ignited within her, vibrant against the encroaching darkness. It was a feeling she hadn't had since they entered the diner. Hope. She grabbed Jake's arm, pulling him to her, and together they took a step toward the light that seemed to pulse at the very edge of the shadow's reach. "We can't give up, Jake. Focus on the light." The shadows recoiled, hissing, as if they were endowed with their own will. What awaited them as they pushed through the shadows and towards the unseen light? Would it offer salvation, or would they be trapped forever in the sinister grip of that haunted diner? The answer hovered just out of reach, but as they steadied themselves, Karen knew the next step could either be their salvation or seal their fate. The light flickered, casting short bursts of brilliance through the inky blackness. With every step toward it, the shadows shrieked louder, their cries filled with rage and pain. Karen tightened her grip on Jake's arm, feeling the warmth of his small body against the encroaching cold, and propelled them forward with all the force of her desperate heart. "Just a little more, Jake," she urged, her voice nearly drowned out by the ethereal wailing behind them. The shadows twisted, almost alive, reaching for them with elongated tendrils that curled like smoke, yearning to pull them back into the abyss. As they approached, the light seemed to stretch out towards them, shining with a life of its own, but they weren't out of the woods yet. The ghostly woman's smile twisted into a snarl, displaying sharp teeth that gleamed under the dim glow. It pierced through the veil of fear in Karen's heart, a tickling sensation of defeat creeping up her spine. "Come back!" she screamed, filling the air with pure defiance. In that moment, time felt elastic. The light pulsed rhythmically, and for a heartbeat, Karen dared to believe they could escape. But the shadows erupted behind them, a vortex of rage and despair that sent a frigid wind whipping through the diner, howling like a banshee. "Mom!" Jake whimpered, fear flooding his big eyes. "I don't want to go." His small voice snapped her back. Striking a raw nerve in her soul, Karen knelt hurriedly, cupping his face in her trembling hands. "I know, Jake. But we're not giving up. Remember, we're stronger together." A fissure cracked through the diner's ceiling above them, revealing fragments of stars in a distant night sky, a vision so surreal amidst the nightmare. The sinister laughter from the ghostly woman reverberated, clashing with the serene twinkling above. She beckoned with claw-like hands, her voice hypnotic. "Stay with me, it will be so easy, no." Karen seethed, charging forward as the shadows lunged for her. She could feel their chill creeping up her legs, warm blood turning to ice in her veins. Surging anger surged through her. They had taken enough souls. "Let us pass." With newfound conviction, she pressed on, pulling Jake close and shielding him with her body. The light intensified, forming a barricade against the dark figures as they tried to envelop them. In that luminescent space, she remembered the folklore, the stories of those who faced the darkness and emerged stronger, reborn. "Think of a bright place, Jake," she shouted, heart hammering. "Think of our home. Of the garden." Of just then, a cruel gust swept through, shattering the moment. The shadows swirled, and a voice broke through the hypnotic whispers, "They will never leave, not while you remain here. You must choose. One must be sacrificed." Panic clawed at her throat. "What do you mean? We don't have to choose. We can fight. Your love is strong, but strength can come in many forms," the woman whispered again, her voice an icy caress. A moment flickered in Karen's mind, a scene of joy, of laughter, a time when she and Jake had planted seedlings in their yard, watching them bloom. The very image became a weapon against the swirling despair. As she focused, the light brightened, pushing back against the shadows that writhed in agony. But with each inch they moved, doubt crept deeper into her heart, terror gnawing at the edges of her courage. Was it true? Sacrifice? "Mommy, I don't want to leave you." Jake sobbed, pulling unyieldingly. The shadows hissed, coming closer, their forms now revealing tortured faces. They were mere reflections of lost souls, desperately seeking a way to escape their prison. "If you do this, you might not return. What do we do?" Jake cried, his small body trembling. With one last glance at the pit of shadows, Karen made a decision. She clenched Jake's hand tighter, every ounce of her will firing to life. "Whatever happens, we do it together." Just as they crossed the threshold into the light, a deafening roar erupted from the void. The phantom trucker lunged, reaching for Jake, and the world exploded into blinding brightness. Then, there was silence. What lay beyond that light? Would it be their freedom, or a harsher reality waiting to trap them in a new darkness once more? As their senses adjusted to the fading brilliance, one question remained: had they risen, or had they fallen into another layer of the trap? Jake opened his eyes, breathing heavily as if he'd just emerged from a suffocating dream. His surroundings were bright, too bright for the cold darkness he'd just fled. He was lying on a hard surface, the scent of salty air and warmed asphalt filling his senses. Sunlight streamed down from above, and, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Jake felt the warmth of safety wrapped around him. "Mom!" he gasped, sitting up abruptly, scanning his surroundings. He was outside a quiet parking lot bordered by the woods that once haunted their steps. Confusion tangled with relief, washing over him like a rush of cool water. Where were they? Had they truly escaped? "Jake!" A familiar voice echoed through the air, sharp and comforting. Karen rushed toward him, her face flushed with urgency and warmth, her eyes sparkling with tears. "Oh, thank God!" She enveloped him in an embrace filled with fierce love, as though each second apart had filled the void between them with fear. "What happened?" Jake whispered, holding on to her tightly, needing to feel her steady heartbeat against his. "Did we make it?" "We did," she breathed, collecting herself, staring into his eyes with gratitude and relief. "They were alive. They were free. I think we're finally safe." As they caught their breath, the memories of the shadows loomed like a half-remembered nightmare. The truckers, the chilling whispers, the ghostly persuasion, it all hung heavy in the air, but the sun was rising, and its light pushed the memories back, too. "Mom, the truckers," Jake stuttered, recalling the sinister men and their laughter. "Do you think they'll come after us? What if it wasn't over?" Karen shook her head firmly, brushing her hair from her face as she logically pieced together their escape. "They're just stories, Jake. Stories designed to scare people. The truth is, we beat them back. We scared them. But what if we have to go back?" Jake's voice trembled, uncertainty creeping back in. "What if we go home and they call?" Karen clasped his shoulders, tilting his chin so he met her gaze. "No more fears. We are stronger now. Whatever happens, we stick together. We face everything together. Remember the love in the stories we read? It became our light. That's what won to allow the darkness back in." He nodded slowly, determination seeping back into his veins. "You're right." Suddenly, the roar of engines surged in the distance, and both turned sharply toward the sound. A convoy of trucks appeared down the road, their headlights gleaming menacingly like beasts returning to hunt. A flicker of fear churned in Jake's stomach. "Stay close," Karen warned, pulling him toward a nearby shelter as the trucks edged closer. They turned, and the moment stretched into an eternity. But as the trucks roared to a stop, their headlights extinguished, Jake's heart thundered. This wasn't just the dark specters. These were real, living drivers going about their lives, and the truckers. They were just men, living in the daylight without the fear-soaked legends. Together, they faced the reality of the unknown. An elderly man stepped out of the nearest truck, his face creased with age and understanding. "You kids all right?" he called out, noticing their elevated pulses. Karen hesitated but stepped forward, lacing her fingers with Jake's. We are now. Thank you." The old man winked. "You got lucky, huh? Best get away from these roads before nightfall. Bad things happen at night." Eyes wide, Jake exchanged glances with his mother, the meaning settling in like a weight. They understood that life could be dark, but theirs was lit by the glow of love and the determination to fight back. As they walked to their car, happiness bubbling from somewhere deep inside him, he glanced back at the gathering trucks, no longer monsters lurking in the shadows, but a community moving forward. They were still on the road of life where both good and bad existed, but they now had power over their path. With a final glance toward the woods, Jake felt a firm resolve settle in. They were more than the tales meant to scare, they would carry their own story forward. "Ready to go home?" Karen asked, her smile radiant, optimism radiating like the morning sun. "More than ready," Jake grinned back, feeling the warmth spreading through his bones at the thought of returning to a place of love. As they drove away, fading from the haunting past, Jake's heart lightened. The journey ahead was unknown, but they would face it together. They had made it out, forged through shadows, and emerged into the light, and that was enough. Don't let the haunting stories linger without sharing your thoughts. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to help the algorithm work its magic. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this wild ending. And please, don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. True fans understand the importance of keeping the thrill alive.